Oh my God.
The sun was just starting to show its face over the distant mountains when Maggie walked out of her farmhouse. The air was cold, it bit at her skin like angry teeth. She wrapped her old brown coat tighter around her body and moved toward the fence without looking back. Some mornings, looking back hurt too much. The ranch stretched out before her, flat, empty, and dying. Just like her dreams. Maggie had lived on this land for 53 years. Every rock, every tree, every fence post held a memory. This was the ranch her grandfather had built with his own hands, stone by stone. Her father had added the big barn. And Maggie herself had planted the flowers near the house, tended the horses, and filled these empty spaces with hope for so many years. Now it was all slipping away like water through her fingers. She stopped at the wooden fence and stared out at the empty fields. The grass was brown. The cattle were gone, sold 2 months ago to pay the bank. The other horses had been sold too. Only one old saddle horse remained, a gray Murray named Dust, who was too old to be worth anything. Even the fences needed repair. Even the barn roof had holes. Maggie pulled a piece of paper from her coat pocket. Her hands shook as she unfolded it. The words were typed in cold, official letters. 30 days to pay or the land will be taken. 30 days? That's all the bank had given her. 30 days to find money that didn't exist. 30 days to save a home that had been in her family for 3 generations. 30 days to find a miracle. Maggie had prayed every night for 2 weeks. She had closed her eyes in the dark and begged God or the sky or anyone who might listen. But no miracle came, no rich relative appeared. No expected check arrived, there was just silence. The terrible, heavy silence of a dream dying. She folded the paper again and pushed it back into her pocket. It felt heavier now, like it was made of lead instead of paper. The sound of wheels came suddenly. Maggie turned and saw Dust rising on the dirt road that led to her ranch. A horse-drawn wagon was coming toward her, moving slow and steady. Maggie didn't recognize it. Travelers didn't come this way much anymore. The town was miles away, and her ranch was in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by wild country and lonely horizons. The wagon came closer. It was old and patched together with pieces of wood and rope. The horse pulling it was tired and skinny. The man sitting on top was even more tired and skinnier. He had a face like old leather and eyes that had seen too much. "Morning," he called out when he was close enough. His voice was rough like gravel. "Morning," Maggie answered, not sure what else to say. The man stopped the wagon and climbed down slowly, like his bones hurt. He was dressed in clothes that had been cleaned 100 times, so worn that the color was almost white. He smiled at Maggie, and his teeth were crooked. "My name is Eli," he said. "I'm a trader. I sell and buy animals, horses, mostly. I heard there was a ranch out here. Thought I might see if you had anything interesting." Maggie shook her head. "I don't have much left to sell. Mind if I look around?" Eli asked. Maggie almost said no. She was not in the mood for conversation or for a stranger poking around her dying ranch. But something made her step aside. Maybe loneliness. Maybe curiosity. Maybe just the need to feel like someone still cared about her land enough to look at it. Eli walked slowly toward the barn, and Maggie followed. Inside, the barn was dark and cool. Dust hung in the air like tiny golden ghosts. The old gray Murray Dust was standing in her stall, not moving much. She didn't even look up when they entered. "That's a good horse," Eli said, nodding at Dust. "But old. Too old to sell," Maggie said quietly. Eli walked deeper into the barn. At the very back, in a small pen that Maggie had almost forgotten about, was something that made the trader stop. He stood still for a long time, just looking. "What is that?" he asked. Maggie felt her heart squeeze. "That's why I didn't mention her. No one wants her. The vet said I should have put her down when she was born. She's not right. Her legs are wrong. She's weak. She won't survive." In the small pen stood a young foal. She was barely a year old. Her legs were crooked, bent at strange angles. Her body was too thin. Her head seemed too big for her neck. She was the kind of horse that made people sad just by looking at her. But her eyes were looking at the stranger. Eli moved closer to the foal. She didn't run away or act scared. She just watched him with those big, dark eyes. Those eyes seemed too smart for such a broken body. What's her name? Eli asked. I haven't named her, Maggie said. I thought, it would be easier if I didn't. The foal took one shaky step toward Eli, then another. Her crooked legs wobbled, but she kept moving forward. She was trying to get closer to the stranger. She was trying so hard. Eli reached out his hand slowly, and the foal touched his fingers with her soft nose. I'll give you $30 for her, Eli said suddenly. That's all I have. It's not much, but it's real money. Maggie wanted to say no. She wanted to say that the foal was worthless, that the trader was wasting his time. But $30 was something. $30 was a little bit of time. $30 was hope, even if it was just a small hope. And something else happened. Something that surprised Maggie. The foal looked at her, really looked at her. And in that moment, Maggie saw something that no one else had seen. She saw strength hiding under the broken body. She saw a will to live that refused to die. Maggie counted out the coins with shaking hands. $30? Almost half the money she had left in the world. It was crazy, it was foolish. It was the last bad decision she might make before losing everything. But she did it anyway. The foal was hers now.
The first night was the hardest. Maggie sat on a wooden box in the barn, watching the foal. The small horse stood in the corner, barely moving. She didn't eat. She didn't drink water. She just stood there, shaking like the wind might blow her away. Maggie had cleaned out an old stall and put fresh hay inside. She had filled a bucket with clean water. She had done everything right. But the foal refused to move. Her crooked legs seemed to hurt with every tiny step. Her breathing was heavy and slow. Come on, little one, Maggie whispered. You have to eat. You have to drink. You have to try. But the foal didn't move. She just stood in the corner, her big eyes staring at nothing. Maggie went back to the house and made some warm milk mixed with honey. It was old-fashioned remedy, something her mother had made for sick animals long ago. She carried it back to the barn and held the bucket under the foal's nose. Please, Maggie said. Please just try. For a long time, nothing happened. Then, very slowly, the foal's head moved down. Her lips touched the milk. She drank. It was just a little bit, but it was something. It was a beginning. Maggie stayed in the barn all night. She didn't sleep. She sat on her box and watched the foal, waiting to see if this broken animal would live or die. By morning, the foal had drunk more milk. She had eaten a little hay. She was still alive. Days passed slowly. Every morning, Maggie woke before sunrise and went to the barn. Every day was the same. The foal would stand quietly. Maggie would bring food and water. The foal would eat just a little bit. The connection between them was silent, but it was real. 1 week after buying the foal, Maggie finally named her. It happened on a quiet afternoon when the sun was warm and the barn was filled with golden light. Maggie was sitting near the foal, and the little horse was resting her head near Maggie's leg. They weren't touching, but they were close. The foal's big eyes were looking out toward the open barn door, toward the world beyond. You're like a wise old soul, Maggie whispered. Stuck in this broken body, but you keep trying. You keep looking out at the world like it still matters. Like you still matter. She reached out and touched the foal's thin neck. Your name is Sage, she said. Because you have wisdom. Because you know something I forgot, that being broken doesn't mean being hopeless. Sage turned her head and looked at Maggie. And in that moment, something changed. The foal's eyes seemed to understand. They seemed to say, Yes, I am Sage. And I am still here. After that day, things moved faster. Sage's legs slowly began to straighten. It was strange and wonderful to watch. At first, Maggie wasn't sure if it was really happening or if she was just imagining it because she wanted it so badly. But week by week, the crooked angles became less severe. The foal started to move with less pain. She started to walk farther. She started to play. And her spirit, her spirit was magnificent. Sage learned commands faster than any horse Maggie had ever trained. When Maggie said, Come, Sage would come running, her crooked legs pumping, her whole body filled with joy. When Maggie said, "Stop," Sage would stop instantly. The foal seemed desperate to please Maggie, desperate to be good, desperate to prove that she was worth saving. But it was more than just obedience. It was loyalty. Pure and simple loyalty. Maggie had other animals on the ranch. The old gray mare, Dust. A few chickens. A dog named Buck who was getting old and tired. But Sage was different. Sage followed Maggie everywhere. If Maggie went to the house, Sage would stand by the fence and wait. If Maggie went to the well to get water, Sage would follow as close as she could. If Maggie sat down to rest, Sage would come and rest beside her, their bodies almost touching. One night, about 3 weeks after Sage arrived, something happened that Maggie would never forget. The wind had picked up in the evening. Dark clouds rolled across the sky. A storm was coming. Maggie could smell it in the air, that sharp, electric smell that meant danger. She had weathered 1,000 storms on this ranch, but tonight felt different. Tonight, the storm felt like an ending. She sat in the barn with a cup of tea, watching the clouds get darker. The bank notice was still in her pocket. Only 2 weeks left now. 2 weeks before everything she owned would be gone. Maggie put her face in her hands. "What am I doing?" she whispered to the empty barn. "I spent $30 on a dying horse when I should be saving every penny. I'm a fool. A complete fool." But then she heard a sound. A soft sound. Sage had come to her stall door. The foal was looking at Maggie with those big, smart eyes. And very slowly, very carefully, Sage stepped out of her stall and walked across the barn. Maggie watched as the foal came directly to her. Sage didn't stop until she was standing right beside Maggie. Then, very gently, the foal lowered her head and rested it on Maggie's shoulder. No words were spoken. No sounds were made except the wind outside and the soft breathing of a horse and a woman sitting together in the dark. But in that silence, something powerful happened. Maggie felt less alone. She felt like maybe, just maybe, she wasn't making a mistake. She felt like this broken foal understood her breaking heart. Outside, the storm arrived. Lightning split the sky. Thunder shook the barn. But inside, Maggie and Sage stood together in the darkness, two broken things finding strength in each other. The old vet had said Sage would never survive the winter. But as the weeks passed, it became clear that Sage would survive anything. Her body was growing stronger. Her legs were straightening. But more importantly, her spirit was unbreakable. Maggie realized something during those quiet nights in the barn. This foal wasn't just learning to live. This foal was teaching Maggie to live too. And that was worth far more than $30. 2 months had passed since the trader left with his empty wagon. 2 months of watching Sage grow stronger. 2 months of watching the crooked foal become a magnificent young horse. And 2 months of time running out. The calendar on Maggie's kitchen wall showed only 7 days left. 7 days until the bank would come and take everything. 7 days until her life would end. Maggie hadn't slept well in weeks. Every night she lay in her bed and stared at the ceiling, her mind spinning like a broken wheel. She thought about the ranch. She thought about leaving. She thought about Sage. She thought about the life she had built and the life she was about to lose. The only peace she found was in the barn with Sage. The young horse had transformed into something beautiful. Her legs were straight now. Her body was strong and lean and filled with grace. Her coat shone like dark chocolate when the sun hit it. But it was her spirit that truly amazed everyone who saw her. Maggie had started teaching Sage more advanced things. The young horse could turn in circles. She could back up smoothly. She could respond to the gentlest touch. People who visited the ranch, and there were very few visitors now, would watch Sage move and say things like, "That's not a hopeless animal. That's a miracle." And she was. Sage was absolutely a miracle. But miracles didn't pay banknotes. On Thursday morning, everything changed. Maggie was working in the barn, brushing Sage's mane, when she heard the sound of a car engine. A car. Not a horse. Not a wagon. A car meant city. A car meant business. A car meant danger. Maggie's stomach fell. She walked to the barn door and saw a black car coming up the dirt road, raising dust like a small tornado. The car was shiny and clean, the kind of car that belonged to important people. People with money. People with power. The car stopped near the house. A man stepped out. He was tall and dressed in a dark suit. He wore a hat and carried a leather briefcase. His face was empty of warmth, just cold features and colder eyes. Maggie knew immediately who he was. The bank official. The man who had sent the letter. The man who had come to take her home. Maggie's hands shook. She wiped them on her pants and walked toward him, trying to look strong. Trying not to fall apart. "Mrs. Maggie?" the man said, not bothering with a smile or a greeting. "Yes," Maggie answered. "I'm Maggie. I'm Mr. Harrison from the bank," he said. He didn't offer to shake her hand. "I've come to see the property. To understand what we're dealing with. The note is due in 7 days." "I know," Maggie whispered. "Show me around," he said. It wasn't a question. Maggie led him across her property like a ghost walking through her own funeral. She showed him the house that needed a new roof. She showed him the empty fields where cattle once grazed. She showed him the fences that were falling down. She showed him everything that was broken and dying and worthless. Mr. Harrison said nothing. He just looked and made notes in a small book. Finally, they reached the barn. "What's in here?" he asked. "Just one horse," Maggie said. "She's not worth much." "Show me anyway," he said. Maggie opened the barn door and led him inside. Sage was standing in her stall waiting. The moment she saw Maggie, the young horse's face lit up. Sage had grown so much in 2 months. She was no longer a foal. She was becoming a young mare, strong and beautiful and filled with life. When Sage saw the stranger, she didn't run away. She walked calmly to the stall door and stood there, quiet and steady, waiting to see who this person was. Mr. Harrison stopped walking. He stared at Sage for a long time. His cold face didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. His eyes began to move, studying Sage's legs, her body, her neck, her head. He was looking at her the way a jeweler looks at a diamond. "Come here," he said to Sage. Maggie watched as Sage walked out of her stall and approached the stranger. The young horse wasn't nervous. She was calm and confident. She came to Mr. Harrison and let him touch her neck, her shoulder, her legs. "Where did you get this horse?" Mr. Harrison asked. His voice was different now. It had changed. It sounded like a man who had found something unexpected. "A trader brought her," Maggie said. She was broken when she came. The vet said she wouldn't survive." Mr. Harrison continued to examine Sage. He watched her move. He checked her teeth. He studied her from every angle. "This is pure stock," he finally said. "Good bloodlines. Strong build. Intelligent eyes. This horse has potential." Maggie said nothing. She felt sick. "I know a man," Mr. Harrison continued. "A very wealthy man from the city. He's rebuilding a breeding program. He's looking for exactly this kind of horse. I could make one phone call. You could have enough money to pay off your note and keep this house. Enough money to keep the ranch running for at least another year." Maggie's heart was suddenly beating very fast. It was the miracle she had prayed for. It was the answer to 2 months of sleepless nights. It was the way to save everything. All she had to do was give up Sage. Maggie looked at the young horse. Sage was standing calmly, looking at her with those big, intelligent eyes. Those eyes that had learned to trust Maggie. Those eyes that followed Maggie everywhere. Those eyes that loved her. Mr. Harrison pulled out his phone. "I can call him right now. We could have papers drawn up by tomorrow. You could be free of your debt by next week." Maggie's hands were shaking so badly she had to hide them in her pockets. "No," she heard herself say. The word came out quiet, but certain. "No?" Mr. Harrison looked confused. You understand what I'm offering? Your ranch. Your home. Your life back. All you have to do is sell one horse. Maggie walked slowly to Sage and put her hand on the young horse's neck. She felt Sage's warmth. She felt the horse's trust. She felt the bond that had been built through silence and loyalty and impossible hope. She's not for sale, Maggie said. Not for any amount of money. Mr. Harrison stared at her like she was crazy. You're going to lose everything. Then I'll lose everything, Maggie said. But I won't lose her. For the first time, Mr. Harrison saw something in Maggie's face that made him understand. He saw a woman who had already lost so much that one more loss didn't matter. He saw a woman who had found something worth more than money. He saw a woman who had found love. He closed his phone slowly. You're a fool, he said, but he said it quietly. Almost like he respected her. He walked back to his car and drove away, leaving only dust behind. Maggie stood in the barn, holding Sage, and finally let herself cry. The choice had been made. The future was uncertain. But at least she still had her horse. At least she still had her miracle. And that was enough. The days after Mr. Harrison left were the darkest days of Maggie's life. She sat in her kitchen every morning, staring at the calendar. 5 days. 4 days. 3 days. The bank would come soon. Very soon. They would take the house. They would take the land. They would take everything her family had built for 3 generations. Maggie had made her choice to keep Sage, and she didn't regret it. But that didn't stop the fear. That didn't stop the terrible feeling of watching her entire world collapse. On the second night after the bank official left, Maggie couldn't sleep again. She went to the barn at midnight and sat with Sage. The young horse was sleeping, standing quietly in her stall. Maggie didn't wake her. She just sat on an old bucket and watched Sage breathe. I'm sorry, Maggie whispered to the sleeping horse. I gave up our only chance to save this place. I chose you over everything. And now we're both going to lose our home. But even as she said it, Maggie knew it was the right choice. Some things were worth more than houses and land. Some things were worth more than money. She sat there for hours, thinking. Thinking about the ranch. Thinking about Sage. Thinking about her life and how it had fallen apart. Thinking about what happened to people who lost everything. And then, slowly, a different kind of thought began to grow in her mind. What if she didn't try to save the ranch the old way? What if there was a new way? The idea came to her like a sunrise, slow at first, then suddenly bright and clear. Maggie sat up straight on the bucket. Her heart began to beat faster. What if the ranch could be more than just a place to raise cattle? What if it could be a place for people? A place where people could come and feel what she felt with Sage, that connection, that healing, that quiet magic that happens between humans and horses? Maggie didn't sleep for the rest of that night. By sunrise, she had filled 3 pages with plans. Bad plans? Crazy plans? Plans that probably wouldn't work. But they were plans, and they were something. By that afternoon, Maggie was driving into town. She went to the general store and posted a sign on the bulletin board. She went to the church and talked to the pastor. She went to the newspaper office and spoke to the editor. And everywhere she went, she said the same thing. I'm opening my ranch. Anyone who wants to come is welcome. Horseback rides for $5. Lessons for $10. Come spend time with horses. Come find peace. People thought she was crazy. She could see it in their faces. A woman losing her home, and she wanted to open a business. A woman with no money, charging $5 for rides on a horse nobody had heard of. Crazy. But something unexpected happened. People came. On the first day, just 2 people showed up. An old man who hadn't ridden a horse in 30 years, and a young girl whose parents thought she might benefit from being around animals. Maggie gave them rides. She watched Sage carry them gently across the fields. And something magical happened. The old man smiled, really smiled, for the first time in years. The young girl laughed with pure joy. On the second day, 5 people came. On the 3rd day, 10 people came. They came from the town. They came from neighboring ranches. They came because word was spreading. There was a woman with a special horse, and something about being near that horse made people feel better. Maggie worked from sunrise to sunset. She gave rides. She gave lessons. She cleaned equipment. She fixed fences. She made coffee for visitors. She listened to people's stories. Her hands became raw from work. Her back ached. Her feet hurt. But she had never felt more alive. Sage became the heart of it all. The young horse seemed to understand her new purpose. She was patient with nervous riders. She was gentle with children. She was strong and reliable and filled with a quiet wisdom that made people trust her immediately. People would come back day after day, asking specifically to ride Sage. One afternoon, a man came to the ranch. He looked tired and broken. His eyes were empty like someone who had given up on life. Maggie asked him if he wanted to ride. "I haven't ridden a horse since my son died," the man said. "That was 10 years ago. I thought those days were behind me." Maggie saddled Sage and helped him onto her back. He was awkward and scared. But Sage didn't mind. She walked him slowly across the fields, and something happened. The man began to cry. And then he began to smile. And then he began to talk about his son, not with pain, but with love. He came back every day for 2 weeks. Other people came with their own stories. A woman who was sick and needed to feel strong again. A boy whose father had left, and he needed to feel that someone cared about him. A teenager who was angry at the world. An old couple celebrating 50 years of marriage. All of them found something with Sage. Maggie realized something during those weeks. The money didn't matter as much as she thought it would. Yes, she was making money. $5 here, $10 there. It was adding up slowly. But the real payment was in the faces of people when they left the ranch. The real payment was in their words. "Thank you. I needed this. You saved me." 3 weeks after she opened the ranch, Maggie counted the money. It wasn't much. Maybe $300. But it was something. It was real. It was proof that her crazy idea might actually work. One evening, as the sun was setting, Maggie was brushing Sage's coat. A boy came into the barn, the same boy whose father had left. He was maybe 12 years old. "Can I help?" he asked. Maggie gave him a brush. They stood together, brushing Sage in comfortable silence. "My mom says you saved the ranch," the boy said quietly. "No," Maggie answered. "Sage saved the ranch. And all of you saved it too. Every person who came here, every person who needed what Sage could give, you all saved this place." She looked at the young horse, and Sage looked back at her with those intelligent, knowing eyes. "She was supposed to die," Maggie continued. "Everyone said so. But she chose to live. And now she's saving other people. She's teaching them that even broken things can become beautiful. That even hopeless situations can turn into miracles." The boy smiled and kept brushing Sage's coat. Outside, the sun dropped below the mountains. And in the barn, an old woman, a young horse, and a boy stood together in the golden light, 3 broken things that had found their way home. The calendar on Maggie's kitchen wall now showed dates from 6 months later. The bank had never come. The debt had been paid slowly, steadily, piece by piece. $5 at a time. $10 at a time. Day after day, person after person. The ranch was no longer dying. It was alive. Maggie stood in the doorway of the barn on a cool evening in late spring. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and deep purple. She could see the mountains in the distance, the same mountains she had seen her entire life. But everything else had changed. The fences had been repaired. The house had a new roof. The barn had been painted. The fields were growing green again. And there were people everywhere, not living here, but visiting. Staying for an afternoon, or a few hours. Coming to be with Sage. The young horse had become famous in the small community. People drove from hours away to ride her. They came with their sadness, and their broken hearts, and their lost hope. And they left different. They left with a little bit of peace. They left with a little bit of strength. Maggie had started keeping a book. A simple book where visitors could write their names and what Sage meant to them. She had never asked them to do it. But people started doing it on their own. They wanted to leave their words. They wanted to say thank you to the horse that had saved them. Today, Maggie had read through the whole book. 237 entries. 237 people whose lives had been touched by a horse that was never supposed to live. There was an entry from the old man who hadn't ridden in 30 years. He had written, "Sage gave me back my smile. She gave me back my son's memory, but happy instead of sad." There was an entry from the sick woman. She had written, "I came here thinking I was dying. Sage showed me I was still alive." There was an entry from the boy whose father left. He had written, "Sage is my best friend. She listens without judging. She loves me even when I'm angry. Thank you for letting me come here." Maggie held the book close to her heart. She walked into the barn, and Sage immediately lifted her head. The young horse was no longer a foal. She was a magnificent mare now, strong and graceful and filled with a quiet power that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside. Her coat was glossy. Her eyes were bright. Her body moved with the ease of a dancer. But more than anything, Sage had become wise. "Hello, girl," Maggie whispered, touching Sage's soft nose. "How many people did you help today?" Sage nuzzled against Maggie's hand. It was the same gesture she had made on the very first night, when she was broken and dying and Maggie was broken and losing everything. Some things never changed. Some things were eternal. That night, Maggie made dinner and sat on the porch of her house. The house that almost wasn't hers anymore. The house that a broken foal and a desperate woman had saved together. She was eating when she heard the sound of wheels on the dirt road. A wagon. Not a car. A horse-drawn wagon, coming slowly up the path to her ranch. Maggie's heart jumped. She stood up and walked toward the road. It was the trader. Eli. The old man who had sold her Sage for $30 6 months ago. He climbed down from his wagon slowly, the same way he always moved, like his bones hurt from a lifetime of traveling. But his eyes were bright. He was smiling. "Evening, Maggie," he said. "Eli," Maggie answered. "I wasn't sure I'd ever see you again." "I've been to 3 territories since I left here," Eli said. "Been moving around, doing business. But I kept hearing stories. Stories about a woman and a horse. A horse that was hopeless and became a miracle. A horse that healed people. I kept hearing Sage's name." Maggie didn't say anything. She waited. Eli walked toward the barn. "I wanted to see for myself. I wanted to see if it was really true." They walked together into the barn. Sage was in her stall, waiting patiently for the evening. When she saw visitors, she came to the door and looked at them with those big, intelligent eyes. Eli walked slowly to Sage and reached out his hand. The horse touched her nose to his palm, the same way she had done 6 months ago when he first brought her here. "She's beautiful," Eli said quietly. "Not the same horse I brought here. That one was broken and dying. This one is whole. She healed herself," Maggie said. "I just gave her a chance." Eli turned to look at Maggie. "No," he said. "You gave her more than that. You gave her a reason to live. You gave her purpose. You gave her love." He was quiet for a long moment, just looking at Sage. "I need to tell you something," Eli finally said. "When I brought that foal here, I knew. I knew she wasn't hopeless. I knew she was special. The vet who told you she should be put down, he's a good man, but he doesn't understand horses. Not really. I brought her here because I saw something in your eyes. I saw a woman who was broken too. And I thought maybe a broken horse and a broken woman could heal each other." Maggie felt tears beginning to fall. "I've traveled this land for 40 years," Eli continued. "I've seen 1,000 horses and 10,000 people. And I've learned that sometimes the most important thing you can do is bring the right two together at the right time. I brought Sage here for you, Maggie. And look what happened. Look what you both became. That night, Maggie invited Eli to stay for dinner. They sat on the porch and talked until the stars came out. Eli told her stories about his travels. He told her about the places he had been and the animals he had trained. And he told her something that made Maggie understand her journey completely. You know what I've learned? Eli said. The most hopeless creatures are often the ones with the biggest hearts. They fight harder. They love deeper. They understand suffering, so they understand mercy. That foal was never meant to die, Maggie. She was meant to come here. She was meant to save you. The next morning, Eli left early. He had more territory to cover, more animals to find, more broken things to match with broken hearts. Before he left, he stood with Maggie and Sage one last time. Take care of her, he said. I will, Maggie promised. She's my life now. Eli smiled and climbed onto his wagon. As he drove away, he called back over his shoulder. That foal was never meant to be sold, Maggie. She was always meant to come home. Maggie stood in the dirt road, watching him disappear into the distance. And she understood the complete truth of what he said. Sage hadn't been a hopeless foal that Maggie saved. Sage had been a miracle sent to save Maggie. That evening, as the sun dropped below the mountains, Maggie stood in the barn with Sage. 237 people had come through here and found healing. 237 broken hearts had been touched by a horse that was never supposed to live. Maggie put her forehead against Sage's forehead and whispered the words that had become the truth of her life. Thank you for choosing to live. Thank you for teaching me that broken things can become beautiful. Thank you for saving me. Sage stood quietly, her breath warm against Maggie's face. And in that silence, the kind of silence that speaks louder than any words, two souls understood each other completely. The ranch would never be the same as it was before. It would never go back to what it had been. It was something better now. It was a sanctuary. A place of healing. A place where broken things came to become whole. And it all started with $30 and a foal that refused to die. The end.